Coming up on Tech News Today, is Zuckerberg right about Silicon Valley being unnecessary? Also, Sony's last-ditch efforts to save their TV division, and Ubuntu's plan to conquer the world by skipping over the desktop. All that and more coming up next.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today for Monday, All Hallows Eve, October 31st, 2011. Tech News Today is brought to you by Ford, featuring voice-activated Sync AppLink. Now you can control select smartphone apps with your voice, so you keep your hands on the wheel and your eyes on the road. Check it out in the 2012 Ford Fiesta and at Ford.com/technology. And by Vast Conference, the ultimate in professionalism, clarity, and flexibility for your conference calls, all at a low price. For 2 Vast Conference calls free with no commitment, go to vastconference.com and use promo code TNT. Welcome to Tech News Today. I'm Tom Merritt.
Arr.
I'm Iyaz, Akhtar.
Sarah Lane is... Oh, and Jason, they're dressed up in parts that don't allow them to introduce themselves.
Audio listeners probably don't understand that I'm a pirate today.
Are you?
Sailing the technical seas. I don't do a very good pirate voice.
You just sound like you're sad.
I sound old.
You're kind of old and sad.
Very old.
Very old.
You're like you got rheumatism or something.
Arr.
Yeah, the healthcare back when you're a pirate, not very good.
Yes,
True.
I have a lab coat on, which means we are going to take a scalpel to the heart of tech news today and get to the heart of it, because that's why we took a scalpel in. Not a very good doctor. Let's just do the news.
Yeah.
4G LTE phones coming to AT&T. Now, I generally frown on using the word 4G to describe anything because it's bankrupt and useless. AT&T is probably the worst offender, them and T-Mobile, at calling their HSPA Plus 4G. In fact, they're not putting 4G in the name of this phone like they do for their HSPA Plus. But this at least is an actual LTE phone. They are coming out with 2 of them. The Samsung Galaxy S2 Skyrocket is an LTE version of the Samsung Galaxy S2. Will be available November 6th for $250 and will be a little bigger and a little more fast, a little faster than the Samsung Galaxy S2. 4.5-inch Super AMOLED Plus screen, 800 by 480, and a 1.5 gigahertz processor. The other phone they announced was the HTC Vivid, codename Holiday, as in Matt Holiday. 4.5-inch QHD display, 1.2 gigahertz processor. Both these cameras have 8-megapixel cameras and can record 1080p video and store 16 gigabytes. Although with the Vivid, you have to store the 16 gigabytes on a micro SD. The Samsung Galaxy S2 has it on board. Vivid will be available in black and white, both colors. $200. Available November 6th. In addition to these 2 phones, AT&T announcing 4 new LTE markets for their LTE service. They're kind of lagging behind Verizon and Sprint on these faster services, but they will be bringing LTE to Boston, Washington, D.C., Baltimore, and Athens, Georgia. So you REM B-52s.
Would anybody consider D.C. and Baltimore sort of the same big metro area?
Yeah, Balto-Wash is considered
this seems a little
a
cheaty
metro area sometimes. They're kind of a stretched metro area, though. So, I mean, you got BWI, Baltimore Washington International Airport, acknowledges it as one. But then there's also National Airport in Dulles. So depends on how you look at it.
So it's a big area either way.
Yeah.
What do you guys think of the actual phones? I mean, they look like they're pretty much the same stuff that everyone has, right? It's a Samsung Galaxy S2, which is like on every carrier, slightly larger, so that gives AT&T a small advantage. Do you think there's any changes to the battery life on these things? Because LTE has been killing these phones like crazy, because you get your data fast, but it's only for about an hour or 2. So I mean, unless
that keeps you from going over your bandwidth limit.
Oh, I guess that's very.
The battery dies before you can hit the limit.
It's very helpful. I mean, these phones don't seem like spectacular by any stretch of the imagination. They just seem like AT&T is doing catch-up with Verizon still.
Yeah, I wonder what the battery life is going to be on this. That's a good point. But these are nice phones, and you have to admit, this is the first big LTE phone announcement They are backwards compatible to HSPA+, so if you just like the phone, if you're like, yeah, I want a Samsung Galaxy S2 with a 4.5-inch Super AMOLED screen, definitely. You can still get it and use it in places that don't have LTE.
So that's how you save battery life. Just make sure you're not in an LTE area.
There you go. Don't travel to Baltimore, Washington, D.C., Boston, or Athens, Georgia. Mark Zuckerberg caused some waves yesterday when he spoke at Y Combinator's startup school. He said a few things about Silicon Valley that were not so flattering. You get this feeling when you're out here that you have to be out here, but it's not the only place to be. If I were starting now, I would have stayed in Boston. Although later he said if he'd stayed in Boston, Facebook wouldn't have worked. So if he was starting now, I guess it wouldn't work. What he was trying to say was you don't have to be in Silicon Valley to be a success. You actually avoid a short-term outlook when you're outside of Silicon Valley. He said there's a culture out here where people don't commit to doing things. I feel like a lot of companies that have built outside of Silicon Valley seem to have a longer-term cadence than the ones in Silicon Valley.
It's kind of funny just because there are so many executives at Facebook, people who work at Facebook at all levels, who have come from other companies, notably Yahoo and Google. So it's like Zuckerberg, I feel really silly with this on, by the way, but Zuckerberg has benefited from some short-term careers at other places for people that are, are good workers who work for him now. So it goes both ways. I see how he would say, well, if you're only going to be at Facebook for a few years till the next big startup comes along, I don't really like that mentality about Silicon Valley because people move around a lot, but he's also benefited from that very thing.
What draws everyone to Silicon Valley in the first place? I mean, I know New York's been doing a big push. They're like, you don't have to go out there. You can stay here. We are
Silicon Alley.
Whatever they're calling it.
And Austin calls the Silicon Hills. Everybody's got that.
But why
the
is
majority
of
VC firms are in Silicon Valley.
And they don't do video conference calls?
That's the thing, is that people, I have a friend who has launched a startup recently. She's based in the Bay Area. She's always complaining, I'm tired of it here. I want to do something different. So, well, why don't you? You can just move your business and do it from wherever. Well, you don't want to rock the boat when you're raising money. And I think, I don't know. I don't really know why people get into this mentality. She travels all the time. She works from cafes.
I have to say, I would bet if a study were done that people are more successful getting funding from face-to-face meetings than they are from video conference or telecommute meetings. And that's not to say that venture capitalists won't travel to hear your pitch, but it's easier to get a face-to-face meeting with them if you're in the same town that they're in.
But there are so many conferences where the people that you want to rub shoulders with are almost guaranteed to be.
Yep, that's the other thing, is networking is a lot easier when you're in person.
So you can do like elevator pitches and that kind of thing.
Exactly. Or just get to know the right person, so you get to go, let me introduce you to Dave. Dave's the one who really loved this idea. That serendipity that you can't plan for happens more easily. But I think Zuckerberg is making a good point, which is there's, you talk about Washington, D.C. and the inside the Beltway mentality. There's definitely an inside the 280-101 mentality in Silicon Valley that's all about fail fast, right? And that's not a bad thing, but it becomes the only thing. And companies that want to take a little bit of a slower pace, they want to think longer term, aren't as encouraged in this situation. And I think what he was saying is, hey, you know what? If you're outside of Silicon Valley, don't feel like you're a failure. They don't feel like you have to be here. There's lots of ways to succeed from outside.
So do you think people are going to heed his advice and actually not move out here? I mean, that doesn't seem like that would happen.
I think not everybody will, but
it's inspirational. If you've got a great idea or you're starting out in the biz that you don't feel like you need to move to Menlo Park in order to succeed.
More inspirational would be moving Facebook back to Boston or something like that.
Look what we can do.
I don't think it needs to. I think all he's trying to do is say, look, if you're out there and you can't move to Silicon Valley and you think, oh, I might as well give up, don't give up. Just because you're not moving to Silicon Valley doesn't mean you're going to fail. And likewise, just because you could move to Silicon Valley doesn't mean you're going to be a success.
Well, I mean, look at the startup scene in Austin, Texas, in Tel Aviv, big startup scene in Tel Aviv.
Yeah.
A friend of mine who works over at Sony says they're planning a trip to Croatia, big startup scene in some Croatian cities that, I just had never heard of. It's like, I think that this whole Silicon Valley thing is, yes, it's very relevant. Yes, it's where the majority of people are, depending on who you want to talk to. But it's going to become less and less relevant because we're just going global.
Yeah, China. Don't forget China.
China, exactly. It's a conference over there right now.
Speaking of China, they are what's floating HTC. HTC announced their earnings, and particularly in China, they had huge sales increases, a 68% increase in profits overall. Unit shipments nearly doubled. China sales increased by a factor of 9 over the past year. So they got earnings of $625 million. That's 18.7 billion Taiwan on 73 cents per share, revenue of $4.54 billion. Sales and unit numbers were close to guidance, so they didn't totally disappoint, although they were a bit shy. However, they're still forecasting bold figures for the coming quarter. They expect 20 to 30% growth year over year, and they plan to expand their presence in China. They're selling so many phones, I can see why. They want to distribute in 2,000 additional retail locations and bring in a new factory online that will boost the company's output capacity by 40 million units a year. So we've seen some rather shaky earnings reports from some other tech companies, but if you're in the smartphone business right now, you're selling them hand over fist.
So what do you think accounts for HTC's success? I mean, they have Android. They had their Sense UI on top of there that made the early version of Android, which was very difficult to use, versus the HTC version. Did you think that gave them a leg up and that's continuing? Or crazy stunts like the Rime? Are these things really getting them to move these phones? I mean, what's their I guess their secret?
I don't know anybody who's bought the Rime. I mean,
It's not the Rime.
The Evo was a pretty big deal.
They make beautiful phones. They work well. I don't think the Sense UI is the key to their success, but it isn't universally reviled like some other
like the Moto Blur thing, which was hated by many.
So I think it works nicely, and they've just done a really good job of making phones that people want, and it doesn't even have to be Android for them to make a phone that somebody wants.
That's right, because they did put a Sense UI on top of, I believe it was Windows Mobile 6.5, which made that hideous thing actually quite pretty. So I think it's because they're actually working on the software side too. They're not just putting out stock phones. They're really thinking about it. And it's kind of a nice thing to see that if you are willing to customize Android, or if you want to customize Android, you can do it successfully. It doesn't always have to be a Moto Blur kind of mess.
Yeah, I've always kind of considered the strength of HTC, the real strength, to be the quality of their hardware, like you were saying, Tom. And especially the first couple of years of Android, when everybody was kind of getting their footing, all these manufacturers were putting out phones. It really seemed like HTC had kind of the stronger offering on the kind of sexiness factor of their phones versus the other ones. Now everybody's kind of catching up, I think, but maybe that's a big part of why. Yeah,
it's a good point. It's not hardware specs, although that's part of it, as much as it is hardware design. They always have good-looking phones that people are like, oh, I want that. Samsung has been doing well at that as well, and we've seen good numbers from Samsung on smartphones. So that seems to be the key. If anybody learned something from Apple, it was make a good-looking phone, and that'll help its sales.
Yep.
All right, let's take a quick break and thank our sponsor, Ford. Ford, a big supporter of Tech News Today. Huge thanks to them for sponsoring the show. And they are now featuring available voice-activated Sync AppLink, enabling you to control select apps from your smartphone with simple voice commands while you drive safely, keeping your hands on the road. Keep your hands on the road. You're not Fred Flintstone, people. That's the wrong way to do it. Keep your hands on the wheel and your eyes on the road. Sync AppLink, you can do things like voice control Pandora in your car. Just tell it like, hey, play that Jonathan Colton playlist. Listen to your tweets with OpenBeak just by asking with a simple voice command. Once your smartphone's linked to Pandora, you can use it to do a bunch of smartphone stuff. Select a radio station, bookmark songs, give songs a thumbs up or thumbs down. Do things like play station classic rock. It'll find a classic rock station for you. PlayStation Jazz. It'll find that jazz station for you. And with OpenBeak, for example, you can simply say read timelines or read replies. So I remember, Iyaz, when you were driving up here with your dog, you had this crazy system that you had hacked together to read your Twitter stuff to you.
Yeah, I had to do a whole lot of things to make that work.
This would just do it.
This would be way
easier. You wouldn't have to
easier.
DIY it. Of course, you wouldn't get an episode of This Old Nerd out of it. But
No, I wouldn't have,
most
but-
people don't need that. So, Sync AppLink built on an API platform that allows Ford to continue to work with Ford Tech. AppLink developers in the app community to bring apps to life with voice in their vehicles. Voice-activated Sync AppLink. It's available on the 2012 Ford Focus, or I'm sorry, the Ford Fiesta. So check out the Ford Fiesta. You can learn more about this and other technologies Ford is bringing to its vehicles at Ford.com/technology. We thank them for their support of Tech News Today. You know what? I forgot the HTC lawsuit and all the good news about their earnings. So real quickly, let's just mention that there are a group of people putting together a class action suit against HTC. We were just talking about their Sense UI, how awesome it is. But one of their default apps is called AccuWeather. And apparently this class action says that AccuWeather transmits precise geolocation data about your location at regular intervals and every time you tap on the app. So it tells it.
So it's not just when you check the weather.
It's not just when you check the weather.
It's every 10 minutes
and it's
or
also
whatever. And
more
then
than
when you
they
check the
need
weather.
to check the weather. They just need to know your zip code, essentially, to give you a good weather forecast.
Right.
They're sending, like, what cross street you're standing at from your phone at regular intervals.
Yeah, that's no good. What's also no good about this is that you can't delete this app. So even
Right,
if
'cause
you
it's
were
part of
like,
the UI.
well, I'm disgusted. I don't want anything to do with this. There's not much you can do. That's
So they want damages for selling a broken. They're saying that, you know, basically they would not have spent that much money on a device if they'd known it worked in this way. That's what the class action is saying. All right, Sony, Reuters reporting that Sony is going to split its television division into 3 parts tomorrow: an LCD division, an outsourcing operation, and next-generation TVs. So it's essentially breaking TVs into LCD department and everything else department, and then sort of an outsourcing parts department. Sony's television operation is expected to post a loss for the 8th straight year in 2011. So they have long needed to do something to shake things up. A lot of people have called for Sony to just get out of the TV business. But Sony TVs are good. You have a Sony TV, right, Sarah?
I do, and it hasn't melted yet.
Oh, yeah.
Even
Well,
though
that's
it's
one of the
possibly
recent
part of the
problems
recall.
is the recall. Exactly.
Yeah. No, I have a Sony TV that's very nice.
Now, is Sony splitting these divisions up so they can sell them, or are they just thinking about the future? Oh yeah, we need to have the OLED department over there, which is the next generation TVs, and whenever we want to make a PlayStation television, it'll be over there.
That's what I thought too.
Versus-
Is like, why make 3 distinct categories that aren't there right now unless you were possibly considering selling all
Yeah, it
part
seems
of
like they want to be out of the television business, but I think it was Kaz Hirai was saying no, we shouldn't even consider that.
Well, what they said was they want to make clearer the mission and responsibilities of the units. My guess is that's probably code not necessarily for sale, although that could be a long-term play. I think you guys are right. Like, it does give them the flexibility to sell off one of these down the road. I don't think they're wanting to sell it off right away, but I think they want to have accountability. It allows them to see more clearly where the problem is. If you've got if all the problems in outsourcing, then suddenly these 2 LCD and non-LCD divisions are going to do great, and you can say, aha, that's the issue there. But, or vice versa. If LCD is the problem, you'll be able to see it a little more clearly because they'll have missions, they'll have goals, they'll have accountability that they don't have as a combined unit.
Yeah, but the fact is Sony's divisions usually have infighting, so this could cause more problems.
Just what Sony needs, more divisions.
Yeah, because, I mean, having one organized structure is one way to go, but to have 15 different arms of Sony Pictures not talking to Sony Music, and now there's 3 Sony TV arms, I guess. And
yeah, but at least those are all under electronics. Usually the bickering happens at a little higher level than that. So,
well, maybe they'll bicker too. I mean, where does OLED fit? OLED will never be part of the LCD TV. So
no, it's LCD and everything else. So OLED's going to be in the whatever it's
it
called.
Could be next generation.
The next generation. Yeah, that's it. It's going to be in the
they
next.
Can fight each other.
It's going to be in the next generation TV. Well, everything is in the next generation TVs except for LCD.
So that's old.
Yeah.
3D.
Maybe it's so they can shut down the LCD TV division faster once they move everything to OLED.
I mean, I still think it's strange that they did this, other than for an eventual sale. And I'm really hoping they actually figure out what they're doing.
It makes them seem really unorganized right now.
Well, you know,
we need better departments. We need to further distance everyone from each other so we know who's doing it wrong.
You know, companies go through this. I've seen this up close before where they say, you know what, we're facing cost pressure. We need to know where the money's going, and we need to squeeze every last dime out. So let's divide a unit up into 3 parts. Say, you know, your reviews part, your download part, and your news part, and let them operate independently. It's inefficient, but it lets you see where the costs are going, and it lets you see what they're good at. Maybe the reviews part gets good at selling leads revenue, where the news part gets good at selling banner revenue. And so you start to see this expertise. And then once the money starts coming back, and you're not so worried about cost structure, you inevitably bring them back together.
Do you think that Sony's actually going to have its television, I guess, like not like a rebirth of their televisions? Because right now they're out there. They're not the hottest things out. The Samsung's really taken over in that market. Sony's been lagging. They've been losing money in this. Is this going to help them in the future to actually have profitable business and being that top brand? I mean, it used to be that Sony TVs were like, those are the fancy ones. That's the label. That was the one that people wanted.
That's what they hope. That's what they're saying. Obviously, they wouldn't do it if they didn't think so. I mean, that they want. Kazir is like, we can be the #1 TV company again.
Do you think it's going to work?
I don't think it's going to work. No, but I also don't. I also don't think it won't work. I think the solution lies elsewhere. Put it that way. This is rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic, and what you need is to stop hitting the glacier.
Wow. That was a lot of straight talk, Doctor.
Thank you, Byron. Side note here: Register reports Sony may be discussing ending their joint venture with Samsung to produce LCD panels in order to cut costs. And I only bring that up because it just shows how Sony is looking everywhere to figure out how to cut costs, where they can go to stop the bleeding. And I think that's true of most companies right now. And the economy the way it is, everybody wants to cut costs. All right. Now for our Breaking Bad story. Over the weekend, this was a huge story. Hackers have, well, hackers. Let's call them by who they are. Anonymous. Well, we don't know who they are. They're
some
anonymous.
members, possibly of Anonymous.
A video attributed to Anonymous threatened to expose details about a Mexican drug cartel. The YouTube message said it was tired of a group which is dedicated to kidnapping, stealing, and extortion. It said the cartel made a great mistake abducting one of their members in Veracruz, and they threatened to publish photographs and other details unless the kidnapped member of the group, who has not been identified, is released. Now, this video was uploaded on October 6th. It just was reported at the end of last week by a global intelligence think tank named Stratfor, and Wired reporting today that Anonymous Mexico has canceled attacks on the cartel's Zetas, saying our struggle is not of this type and our ideals do not go with that operation. The article published by various electronic means is completely false. However, this is the nature of Anonymous. Op Cartel, referencing the Twitter hashtag for their attacks, says it's very much alive. And another member warns the dice are already rolling. It's not possible even for us to stop them. So, okay, this is normal Anonymous behavior. Going up against someone powerful, a lot of bravado. Part of the organization says, well, wait a minute, we're not behind this. That other part says they are. A lot of disinformation. But remember, this is a drug cartel. This is not a government. And this is the cartel that hung two people from a bridge in the northern city of Nuevo Laredo and attached signs that read, this is going to happen to all of those posting funny things on the internet, and listed the names of two blogs.
The CEO of Bank of America got his some personal information leaked out onto the internet, and he probably has had better days.
He might have wanted to hang some people, but
kidnap people and murder them.
Right. So this is the most, maybe not the most powerful organization Anonymous has taken on, but it's certainly the most dangerous.
Absolutely. The whole thing is, I don't know. I really worry about two groups who are speaking pretty different languages, and I'm not even talking about actual, verbal language, going head to head with each other. I just don't see anything good coming of this. People should not be dying.
Now, someone saying they're anonymous has defaced the website of former Tabasco State Prosecutor Gustavo Rosario Torres, accusing that person of dealing with the Zetas. So they've at least followed up in one case of outing someone. And the other thing is, if they do out someone, the opposing cartels, the rivals of Zetas, will then go after those people because they go after anyone who deals with the opposition cartels. This is not a game.
Do you think this is something that Anonymous will actually back down from, or do they think that because there's so many of them, at least that's the theory, if you take one of us away, there's always more of us?
I think they feel like they won't be caught. They're like, nobody will be able to figure out who we are. And they may be underestimating the tech savviness of drug cartels.
This is a crazy game of chicken. I don't know why you would... Well, ticking off the FBI that has to follow rules is one thing, but going after a drug cartel, I don't know. I can't, like Sarah said, there's no good that can come from this.
Yeah. Finally, let's move to some good news. Mark Shuttleworth kicking off the Ubuntu Developer Summit in Orlando, Florida. And he is talking today about the expansion of Ubuntu. Now, coming up in April will be Ubuntu 12.04 Precise Penguin. That is the next long-term support version of the Ubuntu distro. Long-term support means that you get extra support for this thing, usually on I think it's a 3 to 5 year basis, 3 years for the desktop, 5 years for the server edition. And in between LTS, long-term service distributions, you have smaller updates, like we just had with Oniric Ocelot back in October. What Shuttleworth is saying is that they're focusing on 12.04 coming out in April. They're going to make it as stable as possible, and they're going to extend support until 2017. So you're going to get 6 years of support out of the desktop version of this. And then they're going to try to push Ubuntu to tablets, smartphones, and smart TVs more. Now, Linux already exists. Obviously, Android is based on Linux. But Ubuntu in particular, they're going to try to port and get manufacturers on board in using it in tablets. He says, if I were a betting man, I'd bet we see developer tablets and smartphones with ARM processors appearing in the second quarter of 2012. So that's as early as April, or at least later on by July.
And this distro of Linux has been really a standout because it's always been very easy to use, even back when, like, the original old versions, like I remember having the CDs mailed to me, the 4.0 versions. Those things are really user-friendly. So I'm kind of curious to see if this is the distribution of Linux that can actually make the jump to a tablet, to a smartphone, because they have design. They actually have design chops. Like, they know what they're doing. And so if anyone's going to be able to do it, I think it's these guys. I'm trying not to say Ubuntu because I always say it wrong. So Ubuntu.
But you mean a truly open source version of Linux, because Linux is there already. It's in MeeGo, it's on Android, and MeeGo's truly open source, but it's not very successful. Android is technically open source, but there's a lot of issues with that, and a lot of people are calling it not open source. Ubuntu would be entirely open source, and I think that's what Shuttleworth is banking on, is saying, look, those MeeGo efforts have not been very successful because they're joint operations, and so you can't have focus. Shuttleworth is the benevolent dictator of Canonical, which makes Ubuntu. So he thinks they can come up with a quality product that will be available license-free. And that has worked for him with Enterprise. With Enterprise, he's getting Ubuntu rolled out quite well because people realize that the desktop, you don't need as much control anymore when you're doing cloud services, and Ubuntu's license-free. You just roll it out, and so he's getting a lot of pickup there. I think he wants to do the same thing with smartphones. He wants to go to Samsung, to HTC, to LG, maybe even to Nokia, though probably not, and say, Google owes Motorola now. You might want to diversify and have another operating system, and here we go. We've got a great one for you.
And that'd be free and clear of all kinds of Microsoft patent suits.
Yeah,
and all that.
hopefully.
Well, until Microsoft says it has other patents.
Microsoft and Linux have a patent war going on.
I thought they kind of had somewhat of a truce.
It's right now it's going well, but that's not to say it couldn't flare up again.
But right now, I think HTC pays $5 for each phone that runs Android. Maybe they want to try out some other things. HTC and Samsung always try out every single thing they could think of. It's Windows Phone. There's Android, and Samsung's got its own operating system. So I could see these handset manufacturers giving it a go. But I just wonder if it'll have the same kind of traction. I mean, it already has an app store built in. I mean, it's just something that exists in Linux. You can just download the Synaptic Package Manager.
Right, and Ubuntu has its own software development platform that it's been a little controversial because it allows for pay software to play in Linux, but that could be ported over as well.
But will it run into the issue that it's too, this is going to sound silly, but like too powerful? Like, is this too much of a desktop operating system on a phone or a tablet? I mean, when Microsoft says, hey, we're going to bring Windows to your phone, that sounds nuts. People said, this doesn't work. You can't use the same desktop experience and port it over as if that's going to work, because that's what they tried with Windows Mobile, and they threw that out.
I think the Unity interface that they released for Ubuntu, which not everybody loves, is probably their effort to figure out how to make an interface work for a particular device and then be able to have the goodness of Ubuntu still shine through. So I imagine that's what they're going to do next is, well, this is Unity for smartphone. This is Unity for tablet. I'm just totally guessing there, but that seems to be what they would do. Interesting stuff anyway. So I'm looking for more momentum at Ubuntu. And what may be funny about this, if it did catch on, and you can already say this a little bit with Android, Linux will conquer the world by never being popular on the desktop. The whole thing of like Linux is going to have to make it on the desktop to make it, they may skip right over it.
It worked for Apple.
Linux may just say, you know what, forget laptops and desktops. You can use Ubuntu on there and it's great, but let's conquer the world on smartphones and tablets. And let's move on to the news views. Steve Troughton-Smith and Grant Paul have figured a way to port Apple's Siri to other iOS devices, and they are my heroes. Right now, the duo have the voice control app running on the iPod Touch 4G and iPhone 4. They posted a video and screenshots to prove it. The two haven't disclosed how the port communicates with Apple's servers, because that's the trick. They don't want Apple to lock them out, so they don't want to reveal too much about that. The app apparently runs very well, and it only lacks the raise to speak function. The pair haven't announced any plans to release the port until they do a few more tests.
Over the weekend, the New York Times published Mona Simpson's eulogy for Steve Jobs. The two are biological siblings but didn't meet until adulthood. Simpson talked about her relationship with her brother, how he's a family man, his struggles with his health. Also very personal. She revealed his last words, which you probably noticed were repeated all over the internet Sunday. Oh, wow, 3 times.
Disney announced deals with both Amazon and Netflix to stream more of its content online. Amazon Prime will get about 800 episodes of Disney, ABC, and ABC Family shows, including every episode of Lost. Over at Netflix, Disney is expanding its selection. Netflix already had a bunch of ABC content, but it will soon add Alias and more shows from the Disney Channel like Kick Buttowski.
You can try to make sense of all that Rambaldi nonsense on Netflix now. 9to5Mac reports that Apple bought 3D map company C3 in August and shut it down. We were wondering who shut them down. According to 9to5Mac sources, the C3 team is now working inside of Apple's iOS division in Sweden. This would be Apple's 3rd acquisition of a mapping company in recent history. It already purchased PlaySpace and Poly9. So maps on iOS, it's been rumored for a long time, might change from Google to something Apple-y.
HP's Zombie, Vampire, Undead, I think we've covered it. Touchpad is now available at Best Buy. If you purchase an HP or compact computer, you can pick up a 32-gigabyte touchpad for $150. If you want the touchpad, and that's it, it'll cost $600. In other HP news, Executive VP of HP's Personal Systems Group, Todd Bradley, told Bloomberg West that a Guardian report saying HP would kill its WebOS division is just an unfounded rumor.
The WebOS division has been dead for months.
Right. They got it all wrong. Bradley also spent some time talking up WebOS and mentioned that HP is still investing in the WebOS software.
When you know when an HP exec makes a decision, it sticks, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Tablet.
Why touch your phone when you can just wave to control it? Pantech is adding gesture recognition to its Vega LTE line of phones. You'll be able to answer calls, go through photos, and play music all without touching the phone. You just kind of swipe above it. The phone will be released in November in South Korea. It sounds like a cool gimmick, so enjoy swatting at your phone.
Motorola Mobility will institute a workforce reduction action, according to an SEC filing. That's actually just a fancy way of saying Moto will fire about 800 people worldwide. The filing also explained that the restructuring will cost Motorola $31 million in costs due to severance pay and closing facilities. These moves are in anticipation of Google's acquisition of the company. So everyone must be so excited about being acquired and fired.
And fired.
Yep.
And hired. Michael Bevanita created an H.264 decoder that works natively in a browser using JavaScript. It's codenamed Broadway. And it can handle 30 frames per second. A demo of the decoder was shown off at ACM's OOPSLA conference.
There it is.
If you want to try it out, it's available at GitHub, and it'll work in Firefox nightly builds. Be warned, though, Broadway is very CPU intensive.
I've always heard that about Broadway.
TechCrunch has spotted the mythical G drive. While doing a search for Writely, the online word processor Google bought a long time ago, 2006, a test page appears in the search results that says, test page for platypus, in parentheses, G drive.
It's there, G drive, I see it.
Clicking the link will take you to a Google error page. So there you have it, definitive proof that maybe one day, eventually, Google will actually release this thing, maybe.
There you go. You heard it here first. Off to the randomizer.
Randomizer.
So it's Halloween, and here in the United States, we celebrate Halloween by dressing up in funny costumes, which if you're watching the video version of TNT, you already can tell that that's happening, because look at Jason. He's got funny headphones on. He looks like headphone guy.
I'm a technical director.
Wow.
I can't even really tell what. It's almost like it's not you.
I know. Well, I'm not a very good TD, so.
I mean, if you ever wanted to commit a crime, this is the outfit.
That's the disguise, yeah.
But hey, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to make a good costume. Although a rocket scientist named Mark Rober actually created a really good costume. He recreated the gaping stomach effect, which the Register points out was famously bestowed upon Goldie Hawn in Death Becomes Her, by putting an iPad in his front and in his back so that you can see right through him into the other room.
He set up a FaceTime conference, and he's carrying around a little MiFi to keep everything connected, just in case there's no Wi-Fi where he's going. So you can see through him. Seems like it'd be really expensive for a costume. I think you'd probably get something like an Iron Man.
Well, if you already own an iPad, and then you can borrow a friend's.
You know, the one in the back is a little higher up than the one in the front. Valiant effort, but better luck next time.
Oh, and Angry Birds,
Really?
by the way.
Really?
No, I think
You're like
that's-
dissing him because
No,
of the
I think
back.
that's like the best outfit ever.
Maybe the angle was right.
Maybe, yeah. It just depends on the trajectory of the bullet. Good point.
That's exactly
Tom.
right. I am a doctor.
I know these things.
I be a pirate. Dumb old
Just
pirate.
a simple pirate. I'm glad you're not wearing your Guy Fawkes mask today. That could have been unfortunate.
Well, I want to keep the peace with drug cartels.
It's also hard to hear you if
don't-
you were wearing.
That too, yes.
This episode of Tech News Today is brought to you by Vast Conference. If you're like most of us, you want to be professional in every aspect of your business. And when you do conference calls, sometimes that can be hard to do. If you don't want to shell out for a huge conference system, you don't want to pay for these outrageous rates for renting a conference system, and you want to look professional. You want to have that one phone number, the conference code, like the big guys have. That's what Vast Conference gives you. Clear connections when you call, and your participants dial into a phone number, so you don't have to say, well, I'll call you, and then we'll forward in this other person, and oh, wait, I forgot to call this other person. Oh, they hung up. All of that goes away. Everybody just dials into a central number. If they do get cut off because their phone service goes out, they just dial back in, and they're back in. You sit there, and you can operate the conference from a web interface. We use it for our weekly edit calls for people who are, out remotely in other places. They can just call in. Vast Conference gives you 300 callers at once. So it should be enough for you to do a conference call. Try it out. It's 2.5 cents per minute for regular calls, 6 cents per minute for 800 number calls, but you don't have to pay a thing to try it out. Vast is giving our audience an exclusive 2 business calls. That's up to 300 minutes to give you a chance to try out the service. Go to vastconference.com. Use the promo code TNT to get those 300 free minutes. Give it a try. Next time you got a conference call coming up, go to vastconference.com, punch in TNT, get those free minutes, see how it works. Your clients will be impressed. You'll have much more control. Your conference will go easier, and you'll be able to just do your business. So check them out, vastconference.com. We thank them for their support of Tech News Today. So, Pirate Sarah, what's on the pirate calendar?
Glad you asked me that, Tom.
Now you just sound like you're constipated.
I'm an old, constipated
pirates
pirate.
get constipated too,
Pirates
all
need
right?
fiber too.
Yeah, that's,
You
when
know,
you
got
don't,
the
you don't get good
scurvy.
nutrition.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, just an orange. Anybody? Today is Dennis Ritchie Day, proclaimed by Tim O'Reilly, founder and CEO of O'Reilly Media. This is kind of in response to California Governor Jerry Brown claiming that October 16th was Steve Jobs Day. O'Reilly says he has Ritchie to thank for helping them start their publishing business. So, happy Dennis Ritchie Day, everyone.
Happy Dennis Ritchie Day.
The Google TV update has started rolling out today to some devices. It's hitting some Sony Internet TV devices. Reminder that Logitech devices aren't in the initial rollout, but should get the update soon. CNET says it's official. The new Nook Color tablet is launching November 7th. It's not actually official. We just know that there's going to be an event on the 7th, and CNET is hoping for the best.
I think we're all pretty sure it's going to be a Nook Color tablet,
But they
didn't say
anything,
that, so it's not really official.
Asus has some big ePad plans. The Transformer Prime is arriving on November 9th, and 2 Windows 8 tablets on the way in 2012 for Asus as well. That's pretty exciting.
Let's look at what's incoming.
Incoming message.
We got a lot of great voicemails today to go to. Start off with Paul, who, despite overcoming a birth deficiency of being a Cubs fan, has a really good point about iOS 5.
Hey, TNT crew, this is Paul, the Cubs fan calling. Congrats, Tom. Still hate your team's guts, though. I'm calling to report an issue about iOS 5 and iCloud. I got a message from AT&T this morning saying that I'd gone over my 2 gigabyte data cap, something I've never even gotten close to before. So I checked my data usage, and it said that my phone had been sending 270 megabytes every night this past week over 3G. It turns out that that's the same exact size as my iPhone backup. You know, the one that's supposed to only happen over Wi-Fi. To iCloud. Anyway, I thought I'd just send a heads up, watch for your data usage. Love the show, and go Cubs.
You made me vomit a little in my mouth there at the end, but interesting point. I wonder if anybody else has replicated this. We checked both online and on the phone itself. It says it should only be backing up over Wi-Fi when it's plugged into power. So if it's backing up over 3G, something's a little funky there.
I'm sure AT&T is not a big fan of this either. They don't want their network being used for a backup right now with, millions of iPhones out there?
Yeah. So anybody else has experienced this, let us know. Paul's the only one we've heard have this experience. Or if anybody can explain, maybe there's something else going on that we haven't thought of. But interesting call from Cubs fan. Our next call comes from Robert with an important note about the Boeing 787 story we talked about.
Hello, this is Robert from Belmont, California, listening to Thursday's show and talking about the Boeing 787. I know it's not a tech angle, but you forgot one of the most important parts of this airplane. A window in the bathroom.
What?
Take care. Talk to you soon.
Is that true?
That is true. I looked it up.
Hold everything. You're not supposed to be in the bathroom very long on an airplane. Keep it moving. You got a window. You're going to stand there all
You might
day.
want some natural light in there. You know, it's already pretty confined.
It is a pretty unpleasant experience.
Right? You might as well, it's not like someone's going to crack it open or anything. You're going to leave that window alone.
You don't know.
What if you're on the ground and, some people use the bathroom before takeoff? There could be some guy out there.
High.
Somebody on the wing?
Have you... a colonial woman, perhaps?
A bat? You're a colonial woman right now.
Maybe it has something like low-tech, like a shade. I know it has like auto-dimming windows.
No.
Like, I think it could...
That would be hilarious, actually, if it had shade.
I would kind of like to be on a plane and
Actually,
be like, look, there's a window in the
all
bathroom.
planes have a shade, so
shade.
it should have.
They probably didn't make a special window for this.
Yeah. And finally, a voicemail from Josh with some interesting insight on shipping versus sold.
AT&T show. This is Josh from Denver calling, and I think I've got a good way to illustrate the difference between units shipped and units sold. I work in the shipping and receiving department of a major retail store. We do carry phones and tablets, and I see an awful lot of Samsung and HTC phones and other Android tablets, including Vizios, get shipped into the store, and then a month or two later get shipped back to various manufacturers and other vendors to be returned or possibly sold, discounted elsewhere. I'm not really sure where to go from there. Versus all of the iPads that we get in, come in and sell to customers. So when you're counting units shipped, sometimes they get shipped back again. Thanks, guys. Love the show.
That's interesting. Good insight there. Not that those don't eventually get sold, but they get sold for less amounts usually as refurbished or wholesale. So good stuff there. And finally, an email from Gabe Thomas, who loves TWiT so much he decided to carve a pumpkin with the TWiT logo. And, of course, since it's Halloween, we figured what better way to end the show than a look at the TWiT. That's pretty good. Good work, Gabe.
Wow, very nice.
He's got the TWiT logo on
Hold on, I'm confused. How is the TWiT bug in the middle floating there?
Yeah, I wonder how...
He's got skills.
Magic.
You do have skills.
Or wires.
Pay the bills.
Yeah. You know what? It looks like it's a little dark up at the top.
Yeah, there might be a
so there
little
might be
something.
just a tiny bit of connection in the back, but well done.
Very well done. Love it.
And well done to everyone who submitted stories and voted for stories on our Reddit. TechNewsToday.reddit.com helps us figure out what stories we cover every day. So thanks to Stupid Reddit Username. I know you submitted that just so you could get me to say Stupid Reddit Username, and I appreciate that. The Moke, Chris Ward, Lay Zion, Grizzly82, Habituela con Dulce, and more on TechNewsToday.reddit.com. Thanks, everybody, for putting us up over 3,000 people in there. It's amazing.
Woohoo!
Definitely helps us figure out what stories to cover. That's it for this edition of Tech News Today. You can find us on the web at twit.tv/TNT. You can email us, TNT@twit.tv, and you can give us a call. Leave us a voicemail. We got great ones today. More of that. Keep it coming. 260-TNT Show. Nilay Patel on tomorrow to talk about The Verge and, of course, all the tech news of the day. We'll see you then.